Right then, to the Premier League, of course, the title race is going to go right down to the wire. Arsenal, interestingly enough, are playing Manchester United, of course, on Sunday. Manchester United grabbing all the headlines for all the wrong reasons once again yesterday. After that 4-0 defeat against Crystal Palace, you want some facts? They've conceded 81 goals in all competitions. That's the most in a season. The season hasn't even finished yet since 1977. 13 Premier League losses in 35 games. That's the first time ever in the club's history. They have let opponents have 317 shots since New Year's Day. That is the most among every single Premier League side, including the likes of Sheffield United. Casemiro was dribbled past 8 times versus Palace.
Is that good?
That's the most in a Premier League match this season. Ten Hag actually was pretty honest, wasn't he, afterwards about everything. And he was asked about whether or not he's the right manager. Absolutely. Fair play. What else is he going to say? He's not going to say, no, sack me now, you know, don't worry about compensation.
No, what's he going to say? Wow, that was pants.
Frank and Jurgen are still with us. There was so much demand for you yesterday. It was crazy.
Really?
People wanting to hear your opinion on what happened at Selhurst Park.
I'm not having that.
No, honestly, there was. It was frightening.
Interesting.
People like you.
All 4 of them.
Well, yeah, some people just like to see you angry, one of the two. Another new low almost, wasn't it?
Yeah. Look, if it had been an exception to the rule, we could you can brush it under the carpet, you know, and say, well, look, they have all these injuries. Everybody keeps mentioning injuries. And you can sort of say, OK, that was a one-off, but there has been so many of these. Maybe that was... I'd have to go back and look. But maybe that was one of the worst. But there's been a lot. So I don't think it's... The only reason it's survivable for him, in my opinion, is if they don't have the appetite to find somebody else and they don't think that person is out there. And we all know the Bayern situation and they're struggling for a manager and Thomas Tuchel is leaving. He may leave a Champions League winner again. So we don't know that. But I think... And not to say Erik ten Hag is a bad manager, because he's had success at Ajax, but he's clearly lost his way here at this football club. You know, the way they're playing, we know they can't defend, we know they have those injuries, but even when they've had fit players, teams have been pummelling them. Average teams have been pummelling them. You know, the graphic said about the shots since New Year, since the turn of the year, it's been incredible, really. And it doesn't matter who they're playing. It could have been Bournemouth, it could have been Burnley, it could have been Luton. Could have been anybody.
Coventry.
Didn't have to. Coventry in the FA Cup. They were absolutely clinging on. I mean, so it's not like it had to be Man City, Liverpool or Arsenal and they were getting a tonking. The fact that they had those 2 results against Liverpool were amazing in themselves and really scuppered Liverpool's season. But I honestly don't think it's survivable. I just don't see... and by the way, it's not just him. And there's been rumours that there's a lot of players going to go in the transfer window, but the trouble is it's easier to get rid of the manager than it is a bunch of these players. You look at Casemiro, he's been the one everybody's talking about because he's on this long contract. But, you know, he's a quality player who just can't do it anymore. Some of the other ones are wannabes. They're just wannabes. And, you know, you've got the likes of Anthony and others, Marcus Rashford. They're stuck with these guys on huge wages. And for Anthony's part, they've paid a huge transfer fee for him, which you can't look away from the manager, because he pushed for it. So, yeah, anybody... I mean, you can talk about the injuries all you want. There is no excuse, in my opinion, because the picture has been painted over the whole course of a season, not just what we saw yesterday at Selhurst Park. And for all those reasons, I think his position, for the investment that's put into the club, is simply untenable.
Jurgen, what if you get a phone call from Sir Jim Radcliffe? He says, Jurgen, I love you as a coach. I'm not as keen as you swearing on television as you do, but we'll get past that. Looking at what you would do if you would take over at Old Trafford, how do you fix this as a coach? Is it fixable?
Listen, you cannot judge it from the outside. You have no idea. So what we can judge, all of us, obviously, as fans, is oh, they played good or they played bad. They won or they lost, you know, and then we make up our minds and say they have a catastrophic season, which they had, you know. So they have 2 more games to go, and then the season is over, and they have a lot of work ahead of themselves in the off-season. A lot of work. You know, they need to make decisions. If it's the manager, if it's players, if it's a lot of other things that we don't know. We don't know. We are not sitting on the inside. So only people on the inside of Man United can really kind of, make a judgment, and obviously they have to make decisions then how they want to move forward. But it's obviously for every football fan, especially if you're a football fan of Man United, it's a very difficult period of time, because we are used to see Man United always in the top 4 of the Premier League. We see them always in the final 8 of Champions Leagues. And having seen them playing this way, especially now, like the game against Crystal Palace, is highly, highly disappointed. But you cannot give them any advice from the outside, because you don't know what goes on the inside.
Frank, we know Casemiro isn't the player that he was when he was so successful with Modric at Cruz, Real Madrid. Yet surely a player of that sort of experience, even though he's playing an unfamiliar role at centre-back, can use that football experience, that football knowledge to make better decisions than he did yesterday.
Yeah, I think you're right. He should, but if we cannot make a judgment, as Jurgen say, we can wonder, we can ask questions. Why those players who are all internationals, who are very good with their countries, like Dalot, like Casemiro, and so many others, Onana as well, as was very good last year before coming to Manchester United, and lost everything. So of course we don't know what's going on in the dressing room, but how come from Real Madrid, even if you are not the players you used to be, you can lose almost everything in a year and a half? I don't get it. Almost 2 years, 2 seasons. I don't get it. I don't believe, because I was such a fan of Casemiro, and what I saw yesterday is somebody who lost the appetite, who lost the feeling, and is not the one that I know, and with all the football knowledge that we've seen throughout the years that he played for Real Madrid and Brazil. That's not understandable for me, and so I want to ask questions. Why those players can't play together with all the talents that you have? We compare Chelsea and Manchester United, but Chelsea, the young players. What we see in Manchester United is even worse, because they're all experienced players. So they should sort out, even without the coach. But maybe egos, I don't know what's going on, or something else happens in the dressing room which makes the thing doesn't work.
I don't want to deflect attention away from Casemiro, and certainly had a really, really tough game against Crystal Palace. But it doesn't help. If you don't have the legs, right, and he knows that he doesn't have the legs, it doesn't help that you have more legs than the guy next to you in Johnny Evans.
But then Manchester United fans will go, yes, you see, that's our problem, because Lindelof's out, Martinez is out, Maguire is out.
Right.
And they would list these, Luke Shaw, keep going.
Right, okay. So to that end, what I would say is the mistake, first of all, in putting that pairing out there, that had disaster written all over it. Certainly playing against the guys that you were playing against, who have speed and skill, and they rotate possessions in and out, and they have power. And you look at the matchup and you go, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make sense. And so then I go back to the manager and say, all right, look, if we have these limitations in this back line, and we know we cannot keep up, we know we don't have the legs to keep up, then why are we in a back and forth game? At this point is when you need to see managerial decisions. Say, no, we're going to sit behind the ball. And we're going to get behind the ball, and we're going to get deep in our own half. And we're going to force turnovers, and hopefully we get a counterattack with Garnacho, and maybe we run into something. But this team has no plan. This team is all over the place. They're stretched when they are not supposed to be stretched. They're underneath the ball when they're not supposed to be underneath the ball. And the game was calling for them to be a whole lot more conservative defensively. And no, Anthony's over there, Garnacho's over there, nobody's defending through the middle. What, are you asking Christian Eriksen to defend through the middle? Is he going to be the answer to you defensively? No. So then it's all up to Kobe Mino to cover all the space? No. So my point is, yes, Casemiro was an issue. And Johnny Evans is an issue. But if you know that coming in, then set up your team accordingly. And that wasn't happening. I
mean, they're one of out of all the biggest clubs, they're one of the ones that you look at and say, and you honestly sit and look and go, what the hell have they been working on in midweek?
Yep.
What have they been doing? What are they trying to do? Right, it might not come off, but what are they trying to do? And there's no sign that there's any coherent strategy. in what they're trying to do. I mean, we can look at the Brightons and the Tottenhams and the Aston Villas, these clubs that are trying to be something and they're trying to do it a certain way. Doesn't always work, but they're trying something. There's a clear identity to what they're trying. There is nothing at Man United. And where this injury scenario, bad defence, nobody's available, falls flat in its face, is these players all have been available at some point during the season. They were available when they get walloped at home to Bournemouth. They were available when it was the Alamo at Brentford. They were available when Luton when they won at Luton. I think they won at Luton, but it was hanging on. Some of those players were available for the Coventry game. The list goes on. So yeah, you can, if you've got recency bias, you look at it and say, well, that wasn't a very good defence at Crystal Palace, and then you delve deeper and look back at most of the games this season, and a lot of those players, Varane at different times, Lindelof, Maguire, Shaw, they've all been available, and yet they had the same problems when those guys were able to go in the starting lineup. There's nobody apart. You give Rasmus Højlund a pass. He says, a young man, works hard, can't fault him. But you look even the players that they've brought in, even in the summer, even Onana yesterday, and in previous games. And Mason Mount, obviously he's had an injury-ravaged season, but even when he's been fit, he looks like a guy who thinks, oh my God, I've just made one of the big... Not that Chelsea are great, they're not. Of course they're not, but as a player you make a decision. And his decision, he thought, was going to a club that were on the front foot. And whilst he's been poor himself, and, you know, as I say, he's been out, he got to be thinking to himself, I've just made a terrible move here.
I'm not advocating violence, right?
Oh dear.
Okay, I'm not.
This never starts well.
But if you're losing in the manner in which you are, and the other team starting to knock the ball around in the manner in which they were.
The Olays?
The Olays and the back heel, and I said it yesterday, the little flick on action. If you have anything about you as a team, you're kicking somebody. You're kicking somebody. At the very least, you're going to get into somebody and you're going to kick somebody. Because it's the bare minimum of competing. And Manchester United were not even close to doing that.
Listen, we can agree or not on, just briefly, West Ham. Right, here's a scenario. West Ham fans, whether they're right or not, and time will tell, were, not them all, but a lot of them were hell-bent on, they wanted change. And David Moyes, you know, they were nowhere near relegation. They've won the Europa Conference League, the first time they've ever won a European trophy. There was some good times, but there was not always good football. And the fans, to them, it was unacceptable. And yet, at United, there was no excuse for Moyes, who has a much smaller budget. No excuse whatsoever. And yet, at United, people seem to be looking for avenues to let the manager off the hook. Have the standards at that club fallen that much that West Ham are demanding things are better and United are saying, this guy needs more time?
Jurgen, we discussed yesterday the possibility that if, say, Ten Hag leaves, who would come in? The name Thomas Tuchel came up. As a manager, how much do you look at the name and the size of the club? Like Manchester United, of course, it doesn't get much bigger. But then how much do you analyse what's actually going on at the club and within the squad? Like, does your ego think, yes, I can come in, I'll take over, I will solve these problems? Or do you think, do you know what? I don't think now's the right time.
I think when it's in a summer break, like now, you know, obviously you go into a break, the European Championship will happen, the Copa America will happen. You take your time. I mean, you take your time. Even obviously, it's a very, very big name, Man United. It's a very, very attractive name to any manager out there, also for Thomas Tuchel, obviously. But you take your time. You want to evaluate this. You want to talk to other coaches, maybe even to the coach that has to leave, if he has to leave. And you want to get as much information as possible. Then you make yourself a good picture about the roster. You go through every single player, check things out, and you talk to other people that know the club really well. So you got to do your homework. You know, it's not a move where you kind of during the season, you know, they fire one and there's the opportunity and you jump on it, yes or no. You might do that overnight. But this is now a move that you're going to do this summer where there's no need to jump on it overnight. There's time now, plenty of time to analyze the situation and see if you fit there or maybe not.